This is the complete practical movement guide for the finals at the beginning of 2025. I compiled as many practical movement techs that I could, and I'm going to show you how to do them in this video. If I somehow missed one, I'm very sorry. I did my best, alright? But if I did, let me know in the comments down below. But for now, let me explain how this video is going to work. So this video is going to be grouped into a bunch of different sections: sprinting, jumping, sliding, mantling, ziplines, jump pads, and then finally light specific movement tech. Every single thing is time-stamped so that you can easily come back to this video at any point if you need to get a specific movement tech down. This video will not have more silly movement techs in the game, as while these are lots of fun, they aren't always very practical and useful, and they do tend to get patched out quite frequently. And I would like this video to provide you all with accurate information for as long as possible. If you all would like to see silly movement tech focused videos, let me know in the comments down below, but this video is going to be focused more on the practical movement side. Let's start off with sprinting and how it works. Sprint is the most basic of these movement types. You will never run out of sprint, and it ties a lot into the other movement techs that you'll see in this video. Now for sprinting, I highly recommend that you turn toggle sprint on. It's in mouse and keyboard right here if you are using mouse and keyboard, and this is it on controller. Toggle sprint makes a lot of the movement techs in this game easier, such as sliding and something called sprint queuing. Sprint queuing is where you take a jump pad, and while you are in the air, you hit your sprint key. That allows you to do a slide when you hit the ground or anything else. So here it is with a sprint queue. I can hit a slide on my way down, but if I don't sprint queue at all, this is what it looks like. Even though I went on this downward slope and I tried to slide, I was not able to do it because I did not have the sprint key activated. Now let's talk about jumps and slides. These topics have a lot more depth than basic sprinting, so let's get started. So obviously you have your normal jump, and you will get jump fatigue after a couple bounces, which basically means that the more that you jump around, the less height you're going to be able to get from this. Now there are some certain techs in certain games where you can use jump fatigue to your advantage, but in the finals there's not really any reason to actively proc jump fatigue, at least that I'm aware of, so just make sure that you watch that. Jump fatigue can easily be stopped by just somewhat pacing your jumps. It only really triggers if you are bunny hopping all over the place, and you can throw in some slides or even some sprints to counteract jump fatigue. A slide can be activated at any point as long as you have sprint activated. This is another reason why I recommend that you have toggle sprint on, because you can just have sprint activated at any time as long as you hit your key, and you will never have something called a dead slide, which is where you try to do a slide, but you end up just crouched. So the next thing you might be wondering is, how should I chain my slides and my jumps? Should I be doing a slide jump, or should I be doing a jump slide? Really, it depends on your situation, but I honestly prefer the slide jump in most situations. You can usually jump over a railing and do a slide, or in the middle of combat, if you are running around, trying to slide and then doing a jump afterwards is just a little bit more sluggish than doing a jump and then a slide afterwards. But no matter which one of these that you do, it's going to make you a harder target to hit. I just prefer one over the other. You might have a different preference, but that's my reasoning behind why I choose that. The next thing in this game is air strafing. Now, air strafing is basically when you jump and you're able to move a little bit in the air. Now, in the finals, you can't do anything crazy like tap strafing like you can in Apex Legends, but you do have a little bit of control over your inner movement, especially on things like jump pads. I'll take this for instance, and if I just hit my side button, that's where I end up going. This is going to be very, very useful for you to keep in mind whenever you're doing any of these movement techs. Now, in certain games, you can do a backward slide, but in the finals, you can't really. In the finals, you can do a backward slide as long as you slide forward and then turn around. It will keep you doing a backward slide, but no matter how much momentum you get, you cannot start a slide going backwards. So if you want to slide backwards, you're going to have to do a very quick 180, which is mostly only possible on mouse and keyboard unless you really have high sensitivity on your controller. Now, movement in the finals is very based on momentum. If you have momentum, you will be able to chain so many different movement techs together, which will really help you to soar across the map and get those quick rotates. For instance, if I take this jump pad here, this momentum that I take, I'll be able to carry it into any slides and any jumps that I do for a little bit. Even with this one right here, which doesn't send me as far, I do get a little bit of momentum. Another way that you can get some momentum is by edge sliding or fall sliding. I'm not sure what the technical correct names for these are, but basically the premise is that if you go up to any of these ledges and slide off, you are going to get a little bit of a momentum boost. You will also get a momentum boost when you hit the ground with your slide. So if I do this, it's going to be slightly faster than if I was just going to run off the edge. Now you can also do some slides during times where you're not actually able to sprint. So just as long as you have your sprint key hold down, the game will allow you to do slides. So for instance, if I'm charging my defibrillator, I'm unable to sprint, but as long as I hold the sprint button down, I'm still able to slide around, which can really help you dodge some bullets while you're using some things that would be stopping you from sprinting. This is especially useful if you run Dagger on light or Heal Beam on medium. You can also chain some slide jumps into the anti-gravity cube to get some actually pretty good momentum. So if I throw this here and get a little bit of a slide jump going at the right angle, you'll be able to kind of soar up in the air just like that. Just make sure that you look up when you do this, because if you look forward like I did before, you're not really going to go anywhere. Another thing that you're able to do is that you are able to do mantles, jumps, and attach to zip lines while you have your mesh shield out. I don't see people utilize this enough. So for instance, if someone's shooting at me, I can easily climb up here, keep backing up, and I can even attach to this zip line. So just because you have the mesh out does not mean that you're unable to interact with the terrain. Now next up are just some practical movement tips that I have for you. These are things that aren't necessarily fancy, but are going to help you win a lot of fights or at least survive. And the first thing that I have to tell you is make sure that you hug walls when you're running away with people. I see way too many players who are super inefficient with their movement. Basically, just try and hug walls as often as you can to make sure that you are making as much ground as you can away from any opponent that you're trying to run away from or anybody you might be chasing. So for instance, instead of being inefficient right here, where I just kind of do this with the staircase, I'm just jumping down like that, we can do a lot better than that. Go to this doorway. I'm going to make sure that I am being 100% accurate with my movement and I'm wasting little time. Now, next up is taking peek shots at opponents. I don't really know why people don't do this. A lot of people just like to sit right here and just unload entire mags on people and they take a ton of damage in return. When instead you could be doing this, firing bursts and using your slide movement to make sure that you have the advantage in the fight. After this is recoil smoothing. Now this technically involves moving, so I figured that I'd include it. Basically, if I'm normally just firing my gun, it's going to look like this. You just get the normal recoil pattern. But if I move my mouse side to side and strafe in a separate direction, you can see that the recoil is not nearly as much. So basically, the more that you move your mouse horizontally, the less recoil your guns are going to get. Now, this isn't necessarily practical to do from long range, but in those closer range engagements, just make sure that you are strafing like this, and it's going to make you have a lot less recoil. Other games have this, like Apex Legends, and so does the finals. Now, something that you can do for some practical movement while you're fighting is something that I'm just going to call 180 strafing. Now, 180 strafing is basically just doing this in the middle of the fight if you're trying to reload. Let's say that I waste all my ammo. And right here, Glacial has not wasted any of his ammo, and he wants to kill me. You can even mix in some slides right there, but it's going to make you a lot harder to hit. Now, this is something that's obviously a lot easier to do on mouse and keyboard. You can kind of do it on console, but it's good to know about. But there's actually a much more efficient way of doing this, and it's something that I'm just going to call 170 strafing. So if I'm 180 strafing, that basically means I'm going directly back and forth. But you'll notice every time I do this, I stop for just a second, and that could be the difference between you living and dying. But if you do 170, you barely stop. So basically, just when you're doing this, it's a little bit more optimal to not go fully 180 degrees, but instead to just almost do it, but not quite. Very similarly, charge strafing is basically using your charge and slam for movement. Now, it might not always be a best use of this ability, but sometimes you just need to get away from people. Now, you can do something very similar to the 180 strafe with the charge and slam. It's going to be a little bit harder to hit someone doing this, but once again, it is wasting your charge and slam, but I figured that I should mention it. Another core part of the game is mantling, and mantling is basically just you being able to climb on top of anything in the game. The first thing that you should know about here is Mantle Cancel. You are able to cancel your mantle at any time, either by hitting the backwards directional key or by simply jumping off backwards. Heavy specifically has a Clamber tech that you can do pretty much immediately, which is called the Barricade tech. And it's just done like this. All you have to do is place a barricade, jump and clamber immediately, turn about 90 degrees to either the left or the right, and you will have some pretty good movement up to any high ground that you might be needing to get to. Now you can just place the barricade like this, but it is going to be a little bit slower. Just make sure that you place the barricade at about the very top of your jump. As long as you do something like this, you'll have a lot of movement options that the enemy team won't necessarily expect you to do. The next thing to note about mantles is the difference between a half mantle and a full mantle. So a half mantle is going to look something like this, and a full mantle is going to look something like this. When you are doing any sort of climbing, you want to try and do a half mantle as often as possible, especially if you're in the middle of a fight. So being able to climb like that might be a better option than just climbing like that, because once you're locked in this animation, it makes you a very easy target. And when you do half mantles, you can chain multiple together, and you also have your gun out at the same time. Next up is the Demat Clamber. So basically, when you demat any wall, you'll be able to climb up it. So if you know the maps well enough, you can put up a wall like this, and just like that, you are up on the second floor without having to take the stairs. Do something like that, and you are now up here. Now the next thing that you can do is something which is basically the 180 stair climber, as I'm going to call it. Or basically, as long as you are 180ing very fast like this, you can climb stairways a lot faster than you normally would. Now your hitbox will affect how well you are able to do this. So for instance, if you are a heavy, this is going to be much harder to pull off than if you are a light. So if you're playing a light or a medium, make sure that you are using this stair climb trick to your full advantage. Another thing that you can easily do is something called a door clamber, and that's basically just using a door to get a clamber out. So basically, if I want to clamber up to this window, I can use this door to get up here. Now, let's say that you are being chased by someone. You can really use this to your advantage by doing something like this, and you have now just completely juked them, unless they also know how to do the door clamber as well. Or at least it'll give you a little bit of distance. You can also use the door mantle to trick opponents and maybe get a creative kill. Now you can also use the goo gun to create little handholds that will allow you to clamber them. Let's say that I want to climb up this building right here. I can just do something like that. And just like that, I now have the space to climb on the outside. The next thing that's very important in this game, and probably is the most important movement tech of all, is being able to do the window jump. Basically what you do right here is you stand here in the frame of a window, and then you hit your backwards key, jump, and then forwards. And you are able to do this just like that. It's super easy, and this is how you're able to get up into second and third floors of houses very easily without needing to take the stairs, where people might be putting landmines or other things such as that. Now, sometimes when you're trying to do your window climbs, you get these very annoying windows that don't let you climb through them. So the really easy fix to this is just to melee them. Just go right here, do a little melee right there, and now you are able to window climb once again. The same thing goes for these windows right up here. All I need to do is walk up right here, do a little bit of a melee, and I'm able to climb up easily. Now, another thing to do is to make sure that you are on the lookout for weird clamber spots. There are a lot of these in the finals and way too many for me to include in this video, but I'll show you some right here. This cathedral right here, you're able to climb up actually from the outside by doing a window clamber on the outside on these pillars and then moving up. Then you can hit this ledge right here, keep climbing up, and look at that, you are now at the very top of the cathedral. So just making sure that you are on the lookout for those can really put you at an advantage over your opponents who might not be expecting you to go up from that side. There's a lot more of these in the game. Once again, I don't have time to cover them all in the video. If anybody would like me to try and go over all of them, please let me know. Otherwise, there should be plenty of people out there who have gone over all of these already. Now, the next thing that is a very important movement part of the finals are ziplines. Now, you can usually find these in pretty much every map. Ziplines will usually be going up to higher points like this, or they might be going across larger gaps. Now, the big difference between ziplines is that you'll get two kinds. You'll get these vertical ones right here, which are going to take you up. And other times you'll get these horizontal ones, which take you across long distances. Now, it might not look like it, but there is actually a big difference between these ziplines. And it's really based on the momentum. When I take this zipline, it's going to bring me up a little bit before carrying me forward. So I'm not nearly going to get as much distance as if I would go on a sideways zipline. Now let's, for instance, take the sideways zipline, this one right here. If I go on this one and jump, I go a lot further, but I'm also not going to go quite as high as the other zipline that was going vertical. Now remember how earlier I was talking about how important momentum is in the finals? Well, this definitely carries over to ziplines as well. So if I do this, I am able to use my momentum to get a little bit of a slide in at the end. But if you have a ton of momentum and you hit a zipline, you are going to lose all of it. Let's just say that I take this zipline over to this one. I have a ton of momentum, but the moment that I hit this zipline right here, I lose all of it. However, this isn't necessarily a bad thing because on ziplines, because it resets your momentum so often, you can actually do something called Zipline Dancing, which is basically where you attach to the zipline, you jump around, and you are able to reattach. Unlike other games like Apex Legends, you do not have a timer that will kick you off at a certain point. I believe in Apex, you get kicked off if you do this like 3 times. In the finals, you can do this as much as you want to, at least in the current build of the game. I'll really demonstrate it on this longer one right here. I can just keep jumping as long as I want to. This is going to make me a harder target to hit. And even if I want to go backwards, I will continue to be on the zipline and I will never fall off. Now, you can also get some really good skill jumps on ziplines that are placed around the map as well. For instance, let's take this one right here. If you are good, you can land right here on the cathedral, and you are now on height. If you want to go on this zipline right here, you can also make sure that you just put a little bit of an air strafe to go in a separate window, which might really take people by surprise. Now, ziplines should actually have their own kind of momentum. So every time I hook up to a zipline like this one, it's going to have its own set of momentum that's going to start from the bottom going all the way to the top. So you'll notice that I slowly speed up when I go on a zipline, but if I were to jump and hit the zipline, I don't get as much of that speed. Now, usually jumping onto a zipline like this won't really change much of anything, but if you need a little bit of extra momentum for a jump, it's sometimes better to just attach at the bottom of the zipline instead of attaching midway through. Another thing you can do on ziplines is that you can continually jump around while reloading as well. So let's just say that you have used up all of your ammunition and you need to reload, but someone's fighting at you. You can keep doing something like this. Now you have height and your gun is reloaded. Instead of just reloading like this and going up the zipline like normal, you basically leave yourself open to a ton of shots. But if I'm just to go up like this normally, I'm dead. Another thing to note is that for whatever reason, ziplines will actually stay after you are dead. The only thing that will make a zipline go away is if you destroy it or if you place another zipline. So let's say that right here, I want to place this zipline right here. This is all fine and the zipline stays here. Let's say that I get killed, for instance. This zipline right here should stay even though I have died. So let's just go back up to check really quickly. And sure enough, the zipline is still right here. Another thing that you can do is you can pre-place ziplines if you think that you're going to fight in a certain room. So let's just say that you are defending a cache out right here. You could put a zipline right here, and you now have this that you can use to do that zipline dancing that I mentioned before, or use for any reloads you might need. You can also use it to take high ground. And if your opponents don't know any movement tech like this at all, this gives you a major advantage over them and allows you to much more freely move around the map. Now, if you're running double movement, one of the most popular things you can do is to use the zipline right here, jump, get a little slide, and then place a jump pad just like that. And that's going to give you a ton of rotation potential. So the easiest way that you can get value out of your jump pads is by placing them at an angle. So just find a rooftop anywhere in any map or just any angled surface in general. Place a pad right here. And just like that, you are going to go much further than normal. Well, let's say, for instance, you do not have an angled surface. Well, you can use a Goo if you have one. Put it down like this, and if you have a jump pad, place it like that, and you now have an angled pad. But do keep in mind that this does waste one Goo and one jump pad, so make sure that it's worth it before you do something like this. Now, monkey boosting is a new tech that was first posted by someone called Sansoyo. I hope I'm saying that right. And basically what it involves is putting a jump pad next to one of these triangular pads that you can find on some of the maps. And if you slide into this jump pad and the triangular pad at the same time, those pads are going to bring you a lot more forward than they normally would. If you want to see the full video with a lot more examples, I'm going to link his video in the description and right here. So with the Evasive Dash, because you carry momentum in jump pads, you can use it at the very beginning of one and you will go soaring. This works for any jump pad in the game except for the triangular ones, because the triangular ones seem to more or less have a set velocity, but you can manipulate that with jump pads like I showed earlier. Basically, all you want to do is just Evasive Dash into a pad just like that, and you will go much farther than normal. You can also do it with these big ones too. So one of the main movements that you can use for light is obviously the dash. It's just one dash forward, and you can do it in any direction at all. Now, really where the part where the dash skill gap comes into play is when you are able to use your dashes at the right time, or you're able to chain dashes. So basically, every time Glacial wants to shoot at me, so he can shoot at me, I want to try and predict where he's shooting at me from and try and get out of his vision. Now, if you want to, you can chain two dashes back to back to really try and mess with someone. This is usually how you have to use dash against some of the higher level players in the game. So let's say that you start shooting at me, right? And I'm right behind him. Obviously, you don't want to be taking a fight like this as a light anyways, but it's good to know if you are in the middle of the open and you have nothing else that you can really do. The next thing that you can do is you can do a dash clamber cancel. So if I want to jump up on here, I can just clamber and then dash right towards the end of my clamber, and it's going to kind of send me forward in that final clamber animation. So once again, just doing something like that. Now, if you do it too early, you are just going to get stuck in the wall. So this is what happens if you do it too early. Nothing good. So you want to make sure that you time it right, but it can save you a little bit of time and possibly your life. So grapple is one of those movement options that is a little bit more nuanced because it is actually affected by the inputs that you put in on your keyboard. So every time you grapple, if you do forward, back, left, or right, it's going to try and put your grapple into that direction. So sometimes it's actually better to hit backwards on your grapple if you're trying to get height. So let's say that I just grapple and I just hit forward right here. That's where I end up. But if I throw in some side movement options and some backwards movement, I now end up all the way over here. Now, if you are in the middle of the fight and you need to get out very quickly and a normal grapple just isn't going to cut it, you can do this, where you cancel your grapple in the middle of the air, and it's going to send you in a certain direction very, very fast, but it's not going to carry you quite as far. Now, grapple will also act slightly different depending on if you jump towards the end or if you crouch towards the end. So if I grapple right here and do a little jump, you'll see that it's going to make me jump a little bit in the air. Let's say I need to go down a little bit instead. If I hit crouch instead, it's not going to do that little jump in the air, and it's just going to send me straight down immediately. Now, gateway is also technically a movement option, so I'm going to include it. Gateway will go roughly 70 meters, but you can get it a little bit further than that. Now, you can see that I'm almost at that 70 meter mark. So if I go just a little bit further, hit the 70 meter mark, do a jump throw, it's still going to activate. So just to show it, that gateway still does work, and it is well past the 70 meter mark. Just as long as you don't go past the 70 meter mark, you should be fine. So something that is good to notice is that a jump pad will actually affect a gateway's momentum. So let's say that I put a gateway right here. I'm going to go a little bit higher and keep that jump pad momentum as I go through the gateway. Just make sure that you time it right. This is useful if you need to go especially high in a certain direction, but other than that, it's not particularly useful. Another thing you can do that kind of counts as movement is having a reset gateway. It's basically where you just put a gateway at any high point. It could be up on high ground, it could be just up in the air, and let's say that you're in the middle of the fight. Let's say, Glacial, you really hurt me badly, okay? And let's say that I also wasted my grapple pushing up to you. I can also use my gateway to escape very easily. Now let me quickly finish up with the sword dash tech and the dagger tech. The sword dash tech basically works like this. Your sword has a lunge and you have a dash, and you can combine the two just like that. You can also wait a second and do this and then a dash afterwards as well. Then there's the dagger tech, which involves you charging up your dagger, doing a dash, doing a 180, and then hitting your opponent in the back just like that. You can also do a little bit of a ninja from Halo like this, but it's kind of hard to pull off, and it's much more practical to do the normal dagger tech. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. That was quite a lot of movement techs. Hopefully you guys learned something new. Thank you to all of my channel members for all of your support, and I will see you in the next video.